Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's installment of our wonderful Retail Recovery Workshop. This is the third in a series, and we're just going to wait another minute or two. I know some folks are logging in late. We tend to work from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, but so pleased that you have made time to join us on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. If you happen to be in the city beautiful right now, well, it is just that, a glorious and gorgeous day. And we're thinking about our brothers and sisters in the southern part of our country who are contending with now Tropical Storm Sally, but went through a pretty tough time in our Panhandle, Lower Alabama, and right through the heart of Georgia, out through North Carolina. So it's been a wild ride for hurricane season, and we have, knock on new wood, been very blessed to dodge many of those early bullets. So with that, we'll just give it another minute or so. I think you can see our presenters and speakers on the screen. And I'm pleased that we are welcoming back our great partner in working with our retailers, both Syama and Francesca, and I'll introduce them again in a moment. But sit back, get relaxed wherever you are. If you're like me, you're sitting in your office. Some of you might be at home. Some of you might be in your retail showroom or your restaurant dining room, or you might be hunkered down in like a supply closet or something like that. I was on a Zoom earlier in the week where the speaker was zooming in from her laundry room. So if my laundry room looked as cool as hers, well, I'll tell you this, I'd probably be working from home. So we'll be back with you in just a brief moment, but make yourself comfortable.
I'm feeling very comfortable, Mark and Francesca. So
I just heard some,
really like set the mood for like today in retail Zen relaxation.
I'm hearing that some people are having a hard time joining us.
So we're right at about 2:12. Francesca, with that comment, do you want us to wait another minute or so?
No, I think we can go get going. I'm just going to send
Okay, so those of you that are on, thank you for being with us. We may have a few more folks join us. This is, again, a continuing partnership with the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce, which I'm proud to represent, our downtown Coral Gables Business Improvement District, and thrilled to have our partner, Aurelia Reinhardt. Thank you, Aura, for your support. And of course, the City of Coral Gables. Thank you, Francesca, and your team of Julian Belkes and the entire group, and with the support of our city manager. Today's business recovery webinar, or what we call our retail recovery webinar, is number 3. We've had 2 others, along with some great follow-ups that Syama has helped us with diligently. She's been a great partner working with us since we completed our retail strategy study a number of years ago, and has helped us put together incredible programs that are here for you. We do them complimentary because we want you to participate, engage, and have a tangible takeaway as a member of our community. So today is really about communication strategies. We're looking at kind of Q4 year end, a critical time in our recovery from COVID-19, but also an opportunity to take advantage of what we see as an improving economy. Job numbers were out today. Unemployment was down again for the month. And so we appreciate hearing that kind of good news. We want to see our consumer confidence rise along with that. It's been a very difficult 6 months, and it's hard to believe that today, for our chamber, it has been exactly 6 months since we did our last in-person program. So that's a pretty significant deal when you think about 6 months. I don't think anybody could have predicted back in March that we would still be working in this space today. So thank you for your perseverance. Thank you for your tenacity. And thanks for being a great business here in the City Beautiful. Today, we're going to talk about communicating with your customers, everything about how you should be communicating, when and how often you should be communicating, and what that looks like today in a recovering business climate, as well as looking into the future. And so with Francesca on board and Syama on board, We're going to talk about specific tools and strategies to help you use social media. I know many of you applied for and received our grant program. And so we're really pleased that those of you that did it. I think there's a little bit of money left. So if you have any interest, check in with Francesca. You probably even hit her up in the chat to make sure that we get that for you. The city's funding up to 3 months in social media grants, so the equivalent of $300. And then for our chamber members, we're matching that with an additional month of $100. And then if you're not a member, we're offering you a 3-month membership, no cost, to be a part of our chamber and participate in the various tools and strategies that we're using, webinars and programs like today and others, as well as being a resource and advocate for you. So with that, let's give a beautiful hello and welcome to our 2 panelists and presenters. Syama, she's the Chief Retail Strategist from Scaling Retail, and as I mentioned, has been a partner of ours for the last couple of years. Great enthusiasm and energy. She's zooming in, I believe, from the West Coast of the United States. And then, of course, Francesca Valdez, who does all of our business development, is a great retail maven and a wonderful partner to our chamber as well as the BID. And she works with the city of Coral Gables. So let me just say hello, ladies. Tell me how you're doing since we were last together.
Well, Mark, I have been weathering some unfortunate air quality over here on the West Coast. It's been a little unfortunate. However, things, at least where I am in this beautiful part of California, things have been looking up over the last few days. So I feel really fortunate and grateful for that. But I know that there are just so many people suffering up and down the coast who are, undergoing some natural disasters. So it's been interesting. I can say that as of today, it is beautiful outside. I feel wonderful. So man, I'm feeling grateful for this beautiful air, and similar to some of the reports that you were just citing in terms of how the market is going. I was just reading that, e-commerce businesses and selling online is going to see an uptick of about 2% this Q4. So that's 2% over last year. And I think that there is something exciting about the momentum moving forward with retail. And as we've been seeing over the last few months, I mean, things are shifting and changing, but they are evolving, and consumer spending is still moving, and people are still purchasing. So I'm really excited today to get a chance to share and chat with Francesca and yourself on really what are the ways in which we can do that, because it's exciting right now. I feel like there is market share, and people are working again, and things are happening. So I'm very excited.
So I definitely want to come back to that after I introduce Francesca, but that smile, I think, is indicative of some optimism. And I do want to say that we're thinking of you. We know the wildfires in California have been particularly horrific. And so we should definitely keep you, your neighbors, and fellow Californians and up and down the West Coast in mind. It's been a very, very difficult 2020. I don't know if you were watching the Country Music Awards last night, but there was a tie for like Entertainer of the Year. And Carrie Underwood, when she received her award, goes, well, 2020. And I'm going to use that phrase today, tomorrow, and to the end of this year, because we had such high hopes for the start of a new decade. And here we're dealing with just, you can't throw another wrench into the process. We've had all of that, so I appreciate that, but I'll come back to you in a minute. So Francesca Valdez, as I mentioned, is again our great partner from the city, and always there to answer the call and anything that our businesses need. She's also been busy talking to folks who may want to open new retail in Coral Gables. And while she may not be able to share that in its complete entirety, that is good news too, that folks are looking at brick and mortar spaces. And you heard Syama mention the uptick in some retail sales. So Francesca, welcome. How about a word of hello from you?
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. Great to be here always. And yeah, like Mark said, there's some exciting things happening in Coral Gables, and I think that's really kind of the perspective I bring to it today, from like the local perspective, talking about some of the things that we see happening around here. And definitely, as far as the market goes, you know, I have been speaking to a lot of restaurants, really strong restaurants actually, that are well-known regionally, that are coming to Coral Gables. They're opening here. They're looking to open here. And I just think that says a lot for our market when you have retailers and restaurants that are, you know, we're in the middle of this unknown of COVID, but they're still opening. They still see the value in our downtown, and they see the value in brick and mortar, and they see the value in, you know, in our area. So it's an exciting time. And I think that this topic is really timely, because with everything going on in the world, our communication styles are just so important for how we connect with one another and how we are able to, you know, get our point across, but in a thoughtful and you know, kind and encompassing manner, really, to take into something like Syama here is in this glamorous backdrop, but she's also amidst some wildfires, you know, and we're here in Coral Gables and it's lovely outside, but this weekend we dodged Tropical Storm Sally, you know, so, you know, there's a lot of different pieces happening in the world right now, and I think kind of communicating around that is key.
So you use the word value, and I think that's something that maybe we could start off with. When you look at the bigger picture, people are still looking for value, whether they're a consumer, whether they're looking to open a business, whether they're looking to sustain and grow a business. That idea of value is something that is such an important kind of internal metric. Could you both speak a little bit about that and what you see people are valuing right now? Maybe that leads into what Syama was mentioning in terms of, you know, the uptick that we're seeing in retail.
Sure. So for me, it's really, as a consumer, it's that personalization. It's that communication that is geared toward me in a way. So I think that adds a lot of value to our consumers. Our consumers are in the driver's seat, and in a lot of keeping who's going to be in business next year, right? Right now it's a difficult time. People have some unknowns in their job. They have some unknowns in their lives. They still want to shop. They still want to dine, but they're being thoughtful, and they're being choosy about where they decide to go and who they decide to spend their money with, and who they decide to support. So you know, I think that personalization, that kind of communication that's really feels like it's speaking directly toward me as a consumer, that's the value that I see in it, that they recognize who I am, they recognize what's important to me, and they know how to speak that language.
Syama, your thoughts on that? Because I think you'll look at it maybe from a different perspective.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, I think that value is also seeing how there's a lot of adaptation that's happening. So like businesses are creating new services. They are bringing in new categories. They are, you know, yes, providing better and better service, but also bringing in products at price points and, you know, starting to adapt their merchandising and kind of the landscape is shifting. And so what I think is so interesting now is you're seeing businesses kind of start to approach their relationship with customers in a more symbiotic way. Whereas before, I think it was very much like, I'm the business, I'm going to tell you what you should buy. And I'm going to tell you, like, here's what's in, here's the thing. And now I think there's like this customer centricity around like communication, but also product, right? And like price points. And so you're starting to see this better kind of collaboration and more symbiotic relationship between store owners and brands and their consumers. And that I think is a really important, that is a value, right? Because if you're not adapting, if you're not kind of having that symbiotic relationship and having those communication and conversations, then chances are you probably have no idea what your customer wants or needs. And so you're actually not going to be able to stay afloat. And when we think about just the sheer number of businesses that are at risk of not staying afloat, those kinds of conversations, I think, become increasingly important.
So I like the word that you used called customer centricity.
Mm.
That's obviously, you know, putting them at the center of all of your decision making, your marketing. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was our communication strategy. So this is the most critical time in planning for the fourth quarter of the calendar year and the end of the year. Of course, you've got major holidays in between there. So what should, in terms of customer centricity, should our retailers and businesses be thinking about right now, like today, starting this week?
Totally. So, you know, for our conversation today, I do have a kind of a communication, almost like marketing template that I'll kind of peek into in a little bit and do a screen share. And I think that'll add some specificity to what I'm about to say. But I'll kind of preface it with, you know, as we look at all of the different channels that we can be speaking on, right? When it comes to communication, sometimes we think about, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. People are on TikTok now. People are on Snapchat. People are on YouTube, right? There are all these newsletters, advertising. It's like, you name it, billboard, direct mail. I mean, there are so many different channels of communication. And I think as we're looking at delivering communication in a way that is more consumer centric, right? The question isn't how many channels can I be on all at once to capture everybody? The question is, where is my customer and how do I kind of more specifically speak to them in the most direct way? We also have text messaging, right? I know in some of our previous, forums after the webinars, we've had people say, yeah, I'm texting my customers, and that's working really well for us. So as we're looking at what you can do in this moment, and I preface it before I show this template because the template has the potential to be like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to do. And I want to stay away from any sort of paralysis of overwhelm here. But I think that the important and the very, very first step is to say, where is my customer consuming their content? And where might I be able to most efficiently get in front of them? And then once you know what those points of connection are, then the next question I would say is, you know, are there any points of connectivity to my customers that may be under or rather overlooked, right? So areas where I can get in front of my customer that aren't necessarily all the major channels that everyone else is on. And so when I allude to that, I mean, you know, everyone's doing Facebook and Instagram ads, but what about a text messaging platform? And, you know, Jillian just wrote over a chat. Adopting a texting platform over the past 4 months has really improved our client relations. Absolutely, right? So kind of meeting people where they're at. The other component to that, I'd say, is something like, you know, direct mail. You know, again, we all know we have to do Instagram marketing, like these things become very par for the course here. But there are these other channels and platforms that we can use that are going to help us get in front of people in a way that maybe won't expect, right? And that I think is important.
And Syama, actually, if I can pop in for a second, I wanted to share an example since you said direct mail that I got kind of the most impressive in a while piece of direct mail this week. And it was from, and I don't see him on here, but it was from Nick Sharp at Threefold, who of course has been here before. I got in the mail a thank you note here because I was shopping when he was selling groceries. And then it's a whole handwritten note about thanking for supporting them during the pandemic. And then at the same time, there's a little insert that says that they're opening their new business and that if I would like to attend their opening party for their new brewery, that I can RSVP. So that when we were talking about communication, I just think this is kind of something that people overlook, and how good it makes you feel to open the mail, especially, you know, we went through a time frame in life, I think, where you got inundated with direct mail and you got all of this kind of stuff that you just went to the trash and threw everything out. Now people don't send it as much. So when you get something, it's kind of a little bit more special again. And especially if it's something like this handwritten, I mean, this is not you know, nothing against that. This is not expensive cardstock. This isn't like they went and got it like embossed and, you know, all of this. It's just a little piece of paper, says thank you, and, you know, reminds you to come into their new business.
So I'm so glad you said that, Francesca, because when Syama concluded her comments, I was going to pivot and say, now let's ask Francesca as a consumer what she enjoys. And by the way, you teed it up perfectly. And I think you're right. I think you make an excellent observation. If you don't have to spend a lot of money, time, or effort, but the people right now value the personal connection because of social distance. You know, I was thinking, again, 6 months to the day for us, where we've really interacted in a personal space. And, you know, we moved our offices last weekend, and already I've seen more people in a week than I've seen in 6 months, just because of our location, but also people are curious and popping in. And of course, some people think we're the SunTrust Bank. So besides that, apparently
occupational hazard.
I've become an ATM. But let's take that one step further. So Syama, you mentioned some what I would call very traditional communication strategies. You talked about direct mail, you talked about billboards, but you also talked about things that we've been talking about in these seminars, like social media platforms of Instagram. We've done a great program on Instagram. You did a great follow-up. We talked about Facebook and other platforms. But you mentioned two new ones that aren't so new, but maybe for business. You mentioned Snapchat and you mentioned TikTok. Now, I'm the first to tell you that if I've done 3 things during the pandemic, besides eat my feelings, I got a TikTok account. And I'm more of a voyeur than I am a poster. But I embarrassingly spend at least a half an hour on TikTok every day, watching people, you know, with their confessions or products, homegrown businesses, or just dancing and singing. But where does that fit? And Snapchat too, I don't have that, but where people are using that for business, because that seems to me a real, you know, sort of a race to the finish when you've looked at other traditional social media.
That's a great question. So, you know, I want to circle that back to being where your customer is, right? So when it comes to, you know, implementation of something like Snapchat or TikTok, you know, the most highly segmented demographics, you know, in those spaces do tend to skew on a younger sphere in terms of content consumption. And it's not to say that you, Mark, or me, or anyone else maybe not be spending a lot of time on these platforms. But when it comes to the advertising strategies that we're implementing on them, the demographics for something like Snapchat really skews between like 14 and 25. And so when we're looking at, you know, picking these platforms, it's not only, and especially with something like TikTok, it's going to come down not just to demographics in terms of who you are connecting with, but also the content production. So if you look at TikTok, right, and you kind of look at the nature of content production from a personal perspective, it can certainly be very raw and kind of a little bit more real world, if you will. But from a branding standpoint, right, these are videos that need to be produced, right? Like it needs to be produced. There needs to be some sort of component of editing, right? And we need to make sure that it's telling a really good linear story. So if content production is something that is on the forefront, right? Or something that as a business you can do well, then being on a platform like TikTok, I think allows you to leverage that. And so that I think is another important word here, which is in your wheelhouse, what can you leverage? What is it that you can actually like take advantage of that you do really well and be able to exploit that? So if you're like, yes, I know, like if you're like, oh yeah, I have access to a developer who can create a custom like geolocated tag or filter for Snapchat, right? And that falls in alignment with my customer base, then actually having a specific Snapchat filter for your business might actually be a really great idea, because you're going to get people engaged at your demographic with the social media platform of their choice. And I think that that is something that's really important. So it is knowing the platforms, but also using leverage in terms of what you have access to be able to to do that in a really efficient way. Because the worst thing, and everyone here knows who they are, is when you go on an Instagram channel and you can tell this person did not spend time understanding their color palette, their copy, and they can't even get graphic design right, right? And so I would say, like, it's very important, whatever you do it well and take advantage of leverage and your resources to do it.
So any thoughts on that, Francesca? You're pretty savvy with social media, not only personally, but you help out some local organizations in your volunteer life. And you are very cautious and judicious about that curation, because I always admire what you do, even if you're taking a picture like you did this week of the rain.
Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks for noticing that. Yeah, I think it's really important, like Syama said, the way that you portray everything that you do. It's all part of the brand. So from the consumer side, I want to see that lifestyle through the brands that I'm following, and and then from somebody who does some content planning, I want to project the lifestyle that I feel that fits the customer, and from engagement. So I think that's really important. And one question I actually wanted to then ask back to Syama was, because seeing what's happening on social media right now, I've really noticed, and I don't know if it's not like maybe the more mainstream brands, but some of the more smaller shops, independents doing like timed Instagram sales, or not sales, but like announcing new product at a certain time, and people know to expect on a Tuesday that they're going to showcase the new things that have come into stock. And kind of, what do you think about that? I've seen it happening with some new boutiques that we have in the area. And then I actually got targeted, of course, because I'm a massive consumer, and by some brands that were doing, they were doing like kind of pop-up shops within shop and shop, like trunk shows, and saying, join us at 11 a.m. And it was even a different time zone. I think it was 11 a.m. Pacific time, to see, this collection in our shop. And just wanted to kind of get your take on that sort of, I feel like that's another communication style. It's obviously a commerce tool as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that, like, I'm sure you remember Blue Fly back in the day?
I do.
So Blue Fly, for those who don't know Blue Fly, they were like the original, like off-price online website before Guilt Group, or right around Guilt Group, like that time period. Anyway, what made them, what differentiated them, and it really set apart the strategy that you're talking about, is they're the ones who came out with, at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays, we are going to release XYZ, all of our new whatever. And if you want it, you got to get online at 6 a.m. on like a Tuesday. And their servers would crash. Yes, and it was like, it became this thing where it was like anticipating on a weekly basis. And because it was off price, right? It's like, and you don't necessarily, maybe you know the brand, but you don't know the product. There was this like, kind of like, oh my gosh, what's it going to be? Right. And like, how do I, find out? And maybe I want it, maybe I don't. So there's this kind of creation of excitement, creation of product releasing, which I think is really great. It is, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I would say, like, the ways in which consumer behavior reacts really well to things that feel like they are limited edition, scarce, and where it's timed, where if, this is the moment, and it's going to happen. So kind of creating that anticipation or demand. So all of that to say that if there are ways in which people can create anticipation or demand, almost treating something like this is when that product is going to be released on social media is almost like treating it the same way as if it were a newsletter, right? Yeah. So oftentimes with clients, what we'll do is we'll suggest that they actually tier out the timing of things. So we say, okay, well, your newsletter base is your, cheapest, most profitable base to convert from. It doesn't cost you any money to send out a newsletter, right? To do advertising, it costs you some money, right? So that acquisition cost when someone's on your newsletter, it's much lower. So when it comes to like timing something out, right? Or kind of creating anticipation, what we normally suggest doing is create anticipation on newsletter first and give your newsletter people like basically the VIP access, right? So like announce something is happening to your newsletter first. Then from your newsletter, right? And the next day you can then announce it to social, right? So then that's like a second level of engagement. And then on the third day, maybe that's when you throw a little bit of advertising dollars at it, and then you kind of announce it on the third day. And so when it comes to, testing that, you can certainly sequence and test it differently. You could start with, doing it on social and then putting it in your newsletter. The idea here is really to kind of understand the strength of each of those different channels. So you actually can almost test and play with it. And then also so as to not have any sort of like digital fatigue of your brand. So like if you get an email, see a social post and the advertisement all on the same day and it's all the same thing, it's digital fatigue on the messaging. So we prefer to kind of stage out how messaging gets communicated so that you are seeing it, but it's gradual over time. They say it takes 6 different touch points to get a consumer to convert. It's not all 6 at one time saying the same thing. It's like, it's 6 different touch points saying slightly different things at different times that keep that continuity of the brand kind of at top of mind.
So Syama, on that, can I ask a quick, I'm sorry, Mark. I just had a quick question.
I do have a follow-up on that, but go ahead.
Okay, I just didn't want to lose my train of thought. When you're thinking about the 6 different touch points, so that always comes back to me. I feel like the question on the difference of content that you're showing. So if you're talking about your newsletter image should maybe not be then the same as the picture that you're using on your Instagram, and then maybe not the same as the picture that's on your Facebook ad, or do you feel that there should be some continuity? Like, how do you feel that should balance out?
That's a great question. So what I would say is it's, think of like shooting a campaign, right? So in a campaign, you have so many different images that are all espousing a similar theme, vibe, aesthetic, but they're not all the same picture, right? So I would think about it like that. I would say, well, we have this campaign. We have all these different kinds of images that are all in the same family. Funny enough, or oddly enough, every platform you just mentioned actually requires different size dimensions,
right,
and different layouts, right? So even in the process of like transposing an image and kind of doing different things with it, you then also will find out that like, oh, I actually can't use this exact image because this is horizontal and it should be vertical and whatever. So, when you're thinking about kind of the execution of assets, it's really like, do I have a few different images from this campaign, if you will, right, that I can then deploy on these different platforms. So I'm saying something similar, but not the same, right? Okay. So it's not one image everywhere. It is different images from the campaign. And I think if we can approach it in that perspective, and you can get creative with it. So let's say you don't have the budget to do a photo shoot and have so many images. Well, you can kind of use Photoshop and Illustrator and, all of that to basically take certain images, collage things, right? Use an image in a different way, use copy in different ways. Like you can get creative. I mean, I know that we're both big fans of Canva, right? You can
love it.
Francesca, do you want to sing the praises of Canva?
One more time. Yes, that's where we make everything. No, it's awesome.
It's great. And so I would say that like from the perspective of like asset allocation and all of that, the worst thing, so like, once Mark, to go back to what are the things, right? Well, once you figure out your platforms and once you figure out kind of your key messaging and where your customers are, then it's about creating assets, right? So it's not quite as simple as saying, hey, tomorrow I'm going to launch all of these ads, or I'm going to launch all of this. It's like, oh, let me look at the campaign creation, right? Let me look at like, what are all of the assets that I need? Let me see them all kind of visually laid out so I can, it's creative directing, right? So I can actually see the progression of this messaging. This is where we kind of move out of the technical hat of marketing, which is like, you know, what's your return on advertising spend? What's the budget? But we really move into the more like behavioral side and the emotional and creative side of advertising and marketing, where it's very much about, you know, what are the images, right? And then once you have images and once you have the storytelling, then, right, you can move on to the next phase, which is like potentially A/B split testing things, right? You're like, I wonder how this image performs better than that image. Like, how, you know, you can start to play with it. But out the gate, like, you do not approach this kind of content planning from both a visual, aesthetic, creative standpoint, and then also from a data-driven kind of KPI standpoint, then you really miss out, because no matter how much data you have or you've planned your budget, if the creative isn't there, it doesn't matter, right? Like no one's gonna buy. It just doesn't matter. Similarly, if you have the creative and you're a great creative director, but you have no idea how to spend your money online or how to plan the campaigns or stage it out, then you're also not going to be able to get as much reach. So this is really genuinely where creativity and kind of the more metrics-based, you know, analytics kind of come together.
So let me just pick up on that and a couple earlier comments that I made a note about. So you talk about digital fatigue. You talked about a lot of, you know, leveraging the strengths of your different channels. Can you over communicate with customers and clients? Can there be a point where people not only have fatigue from all the messaging that we're receiving, because all of us have made that pivot, but to where you irritate them to the point where you've turned them off?
That's a great question. I'll tell you a couple thoughts on that. One, for big businesses, yes. No one wants to get a ton of text messages from Bloomingdale's. Like, no one wants a bunch of text messages from Bloomingdale's. I mean, it's
Best
like
Buy. They text you all the time. Best Buy.
Best Buy. Like, big companies actually lose when they over communicate. Mostly because we already know like what they sell. We know, right? So big businesses definitely over communicate, and challenging time here when it comes to disseminating their information, because every big business is trying to act like a small business. Every single one. They're trying to pretend to be small. This is where being a small business owner really has its huge advantages here. Number one, because you have the opportunity to be small and communicate and leverage who you are and your relationships and your teams. And number two, you can actually have a two-way conversation. So like your text message to somebody might actually get a response back, or your email might get a response back, which means you actually can like have a conversation and dialogue and kind of further solidify those customer relationships, thereby increasing customer lifetime value and really ensuring that you're building a strong, cohesive brand. So big companies, yes, can over communicate and people will opt out. It's pretty bad. Small businesses, for the most part, actually, small businesses tend to not communicate enough. I can't tell you how many small business owners tell me how freaked out they are by sending out a weekly email. And I'm like, you need to send out a weekly email. And they're like, but I don't want to send out too many emails. I don't want to like bombard my customer. And I'm like, do you realize that like, even if your email just shows up in their inbox, that you are solidifying the behavioral kind of connectivity between your brand and them. Like, oh yeah, that company. Oh yeah, that brand. So I would say actually, in fact, small businesses tend to not communicate enough, mostly because of bandwidth issues. So most of the time, our small business owners just have too many things to do. So spending that time doing all that reach out tends to be a little labor intensive. But that weekly email, the cadence, right? So this is also very important. It's not just it's not just doing it or having too much of it, but having a consistency with your cadence, I think is is very important. You know, I'm a Wednesday morning girl. I'm going to send out my emails Wednesday morning. Everyone's going to be able to look forward to it. Maybe there's something interesting in there. Or maybe you're Friday morning, or maybe it's Monday. So whatever you're doing, I would say stay consistent, you know, and if you can't do it well or consistently, then maybe you shouldn't do it. Or maybe you got to hire someone else to do it.
So Jill posted in the chat that they've adopted a texting platform over the last 4 months, and it's really improved client relations and closing deals. We haven't really talked about that as a platform, but where do you see that fitting into that cadence, and how do you create a tone in a text message differently than you would in a, you know, an Instagram post, which pops with color and things like that, unless you're using attachments or pics or things like that?
So what's amazing about text messaging is that you actually get this like 99% open rate. So like it is rare actually to send out a text message and not have eyeballs. So if you can put eyeballs on it, then put eyeballs on it. And like, I think that is, I think that that's really important. So texting, I think, can be wonderful. Also like very high kind of like, I think I was talking to him the other day, it's like 45-50% click through on his text messages. So like also very high in terms of conversion. Now, usually the challenge with text messaging has to do with the bandwidth of like the mechanics of how you do it. And there are services that allow you to do it. So like, for example, Acuity is a CMS platform, content management platform that allows you to do like email. It allows you to do funnels. You can do forms. You can also do text messages, right? So on your newsletter sign up, you can have a space for people to enter in their phone number, and then you can put them into your system, and then you can start to do it, you know, a bit broader, right? And kind of hit more people with that messaging at one time. There's also a company out there called Twilio, right? That allows you to kind of do, again, more en masse kind of text messaging. The goal here is ultimately to use text messaging as a means of relationship building, but also as a broadcasting method, right? I mean, you're not going to text every single person in your book, you know, once a week. That's going to take you forever. So looking at these different systems, I think is really valuable. Because it allows you to like scale a little bit more kind of your ability to communicate. But also you have to keep in mind that there is an element here of opting in, right? So right now with like GDPR and things like that with your email and with tracking and cookies and all of that, you know, you do also have to opt in with phone numbers. So the thing that I would say not to do is you can text someone the first time, right? If you do have their phone number, to make sure that, you know, to kind of like check in, hey, do you want to continue to communicate over text? You are going to need some sort of opt-in confirmation here. There isn't anything kind of hard and fast around it now, but it will be, you know, and we are going to have to opt in. So I'd say privacy and consent here when it comes to texting is going to be really important.
So I have a thought on that. Oh, sorry. I had a thought on that because a brand that I follow online and that I personally shop from, when I went to buy some things on it recently, had a pop-up come up on the screen and it said, if you give us your phone number, we'll give you 20% off. And I thought that was really interesting. And so, you know, being the consumer that I am, I'm like, let's see what happens here. I'm not too concerned with privacy, you know, in that regard. So I put it in, I immediately got a text message and it said, here's your code for 20% off. And then now recently, I mean, it was maybe 2.5 weeks ago. It wasn't that long. And I'll tell you, they did kind of lose a sale because I had everything in my cart already. Right. And then I was then I was like, okay, now I'm opted in my text message. My text message came through and I couldn't find the code. And I was like, anyway, I clicked off the page and I still have been meaning to go in there, but I know that because it's in my phone, I still have that code because that's kind of, you know, like, cause I know it's there. But I thought it was really interesting that they had taken the step to optimize their website by having that pop-up come up there to capture the phone number. And I thought that was it was a pretty smart marketing tip.
Yeah, I think it's excellent. I think we're going to see more people, right, as our little computers that we carry around with us, as they are increasingly our modes of purchasing, right? You know, that text messaging kind of optimization to close the sale, I think is great. And I think that having discount codes and things like that are absolutely how people get enticed. I've seen everything from 10% to 20%. And really, when it comes to who's using it, I mean, text messaging really started, I would say, 5 years ago. And it was like people were playing with it and trying it. Now consumers are so used to it, right? So a lot of things when it comes to marketing technologies, right, it has to be, with marketing technologies, a lot of it's not just using the latest and greatest, but using it at a point where consumers are actually like okay with it, or they're like, so you don't necessarily want to be the first to market with some of these things, integrations. But now I think is definitely the time to be using, definitely the time to be using things like text messaging.
Yeah, I like what you said about in terms of the open rate, because I think all of us look at that, whether we're looking at, for us, our platforms for events, we look at Instagram and how much people watch our stories. And so we don't want to get too caught up in that. But, when you talk about texting, we've been a little bit nervous about using that, one, gathering that data. So Francesca shared a really great way that folks are doing that. But two, also knowing that you're sort of crossing that last frontier, because everybody looks at their texts. That one, you can't really put an out of office on that or send it to a different spam. It is right front and center. So is that the last frontier of being in people's, most intimate space?
I mean, it is, now it's to the point where you can set like do not disturbs on text messages. So I've had to do that for a couple, like Beyond Yoga sends me a lot.
Are you going to say for a couple of people? And we'd like their names, please. I'm just kidding.
Yes, I've had to put do not disturb for a couple of people / brands. And what that does, which is great, is you don't get the same kind of notification, right? It's like a silent notification. But as far as like the intimacy of access and kind of getting in front of people, I would agree with you, Mark. I'd say that texting is kind of the most intimate space right now. I'd say kind of moving on from that is going to be, as we're looking at, engaging with like our Apple Watches, right? And kind of things that are on our bodies. So I would say like those kinds of, ways of engaging. I'd love to see more, and now we're getting a little futuristic here, but I'd love to see more in terms of the ability to shop from our Apple Watches. I think that would actually cause a lot more problems for our pocketbooks than anything else, because we'd be able to be like, oh yeah, I want that. It's already way too easy on our phones. But I do think that texting is really probably the most intimate way right now that we can sell to consumers.
So can I ask a question then? How would you shape the message on a text message that might be different from a social media? Because it's a small amount, right? That
Absolutely.
You're going to get. Sometimes I get texts that I can't tell because obviously I've shared, I've opted into a couple things, and sometimes I can't tell. I'm like, is that a spam or did I ask for this one? And I'd say that it has happened that one that looked like spam is not. Because they haven't been really clear in their communication.
It's a really good point.
So let me ask you, Francesca, since you did that sign up, I don't know how long ago it was. Have you found that experience intrusive?
No, so I just pulled it up. So I can share what it is. It's a brand called The Laundress, which is a very nice
home cleaning products.
Home cleaning products, laundry detergent, things like this.
I now own glass cleaner thanks to you. That's like $35. And I don't actually own any glass, like a mirror.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's going to, this way it doesn't have the chemicals, all these things that are high priority for me right now. No chemicals, blah, blah, blah. So I guess I opted in on September 2nd. They confirmed that same day. And then I heard from them again on the 4th. I heard from them on the 7th. And then I heard from them on Monday. So I heard from them, three times, since opting in. So
that's not bad in about a 2-week window, because that was the 2nd. So the 16th was yesterday.
It hasn't annoyed me yet, but we'll see.
So I did the same thing back at Christmas time because I wanted to buy an ugly sweater. And I opted in somehow to being texted by a group called Tipsy Elves. And they don't just send an email or a text or a link. They send an image, and it's always somebody dancing around. And I'm still getting them in September.
Oh, no.
And I'm thinking, am I really buying a Christmas sweater now? So I won't say it's been obtrusive. It's maybe once a month, but I'm thinking, going back to Syama's comment, it's like, think about the message, the timing,
right,
curation. I love the word you use, cadence, because I think that's a word that helps people really understand. Cadence is a rhythm, and it has a certain rhyme and reason to it. I came up with 2 ideas why you guys were talking, that I think Francesca should send out her own personal curated newsletter on Fridays. Fridays with Francesca, and she gives you great ideas for the weekend. And Syama's going to kick off the week. She's going to do Sundays with Syama.
Oh.
So a little at home, but what's up for the week ahead? So,
I love that. I also think that Francesca just, it wouldn't be Francesca without some Friday cocktail kind of recapping. Like,
what can I say?
So Francesca recently had a birthday, and she had a little socially distant gathering for some fellow Virgos.
Yes.
And she is always the host of the most, but she also shows off those really great products. And I feel some of those come from some of these visuals that you see on Instagram. You talk to me about restoration hardware and places like that, as well as very localized, boutiques. We often talk about, Patricia and Rosie at Violetta's and things like that. So we have a lot of that here. But I know part of it today is sharing that message with them. So let me talk about 2 other things, because we had a little pre-call. So we're basically now looking at the holidays. Is that an appropriate moment to be thinking about that? Because maybe folks are thinking, not really in the holiday mood. I don't know. I was in a Walgreens earlier in the week, and they've got all the Halloween candy out. And I'm thinking, trick-or-treating is maybe not happening in the traditional sense, but we have that upon us. We have Thanksgiving, and then, of course, the holidays. We have the Jewish New Year on tomorrow evening. I mean, are we in a space, we've been in this sort of postpone and cancel, but are retailers okay to say, this is what we're talking about. This is important to us in our recovery, but we don't want to seem insensitive.
I think that's a great segue. I would say so many of us did, promos and things for Labor Day. And I think Labor Day was one of the very first times where we had to confront traditional sale time period and find different ways of communicating that. And obviously, everyone was still using the Labor Day language, right? Because that's what we call the day off, though most people were working from home and were not in their offices. And it wasn't like a traditional, it was a day off, but it was unusual. It was an unusual Labor Day, unlike any other we had experienced. And I would say when it comes to how we're looking at promotional time periods, I mean, there's been just a very interesting conversation that's been happening about the retail industry, which is like, how do we become less promotional?
Right.
How do we actually have the right inventory to be sold without having to heavily discount, mark down things during certain time periods? How do we become more conscious with our inventory levels? And all of that really impacts communication, because all that impacts what you can discount and what inventory and what you have on hand during those key time periods. And so all of that to say that, you know, for Halloween, right? Are people with kids still going to be getting dressed up at home? Probably. Are they going to be, you know, going to get candy? I don't know. You know, I don't know to the extent that we're going to be celebrating things, but there are these components of tradition, right, that still get to be acknowledged. And so I think that in terms of like the feeling of, let's say, the new normalcy, right, being able to acknowledge that, you know, hey, this is not your normal Halloween, right? So how do we get creative and still have fun and create something that is exciting, right? That is going to speak to this moment right now. And that's not going to necessarily pretend like we're not in it. And that's not going to also overlook it, right? So I would say newsletter ideas around Halloween would be like, you know, how to make like fun, scary cocktails at home, right? Or like ideas on, you know, socially distanced get-togethers, or maybe some education around like where Halloween came from. And, you know, I mean, there's so many different ways of kind of still touching on things that are happening without necessarily saying, hey, yeah, we're all going to be back to normal during this time period. But as we're looking at kind of the, you know, Halloween's also a little unusual because there's usually not like heavily discounted things around Halloween. It's more celebratory. But as we're looking at Black Friday, Cyber Monday, kind of moving into the holidays more specifically, people are going to be shopping, and there is going to be a lot of gift giving. And whether or not it's coming out with a program where, you know, you're able to buy gifts and have them shipped directly to, you know, to the recipient, and how you approach that, I think should be dealt with some optimism. You know, I think right now we're kind of moving into a more optimistic outlook despite all these natural disasters. I do think that our economy and things are heading in a more positive direction. So I would say, you know, with a focus on community, family, togetherness, being grateful for the things that we have, that kind of language of community is going to go really far. And I think it's going to be both in terms of how we treat those we love, but also I think in these last 6-7 months, the concept of, you know, your own kind of mental health or taking care of yourself, and all of those kinds of, you know, self-nurturing things have become very important. So looking at language, not just around others, but also like, how do you treat yourself well during the holidays, right? How are you going to be doing some self-care? And so those are two very different kind of communication tracks that you can run parallel with. You don't have to pick one. You can run in parallel with those for any business.
No, I agree with that. And again, as we look at the entirety of this conversation, it seems to come back again to, you really need to know your customers better than maybe they even know themselves. And so has this been a time when folks were doing that? I hope so. I mean, Francesca and I have talked about, you know, this 6-month period where in many cases, some of our businesses were completely shut down, or certainly rolled back to a very modified schedule and capacity. Were you looking at, you know, your marketing? Were you looking at your website? Were you looking at e-commerce? Were you looking at even just your storefront, because people were still walking around and getting out and getting fresh air? I think there's still time to do that, but now is the time to say, all right, I've drawn the line in the sand and I'm moving forward. So I'd love your thoughts on that. And if you're seeing that as just a trend with your other clients and other communities, because Coral Gables is unique, but we also have, you know, very specific ways that we connect with our clients too.
Mm-hmm. So I would say, like, you know, when it comes to the kind of, so, okay, this is a really cool kind of topic, which is, how do you actually get to know your customer, right? We talk a lot about knowing the customer, but how do you actually get to know them? And so while you cannot have a one-on-one relationship with every single person, part of a strategy within your organization needs to be sampling and having kind of customer-centric interviews and conversations with them on like a quarterly or twice a year basis, right? Where you're getting on the phone and you're understanding, you know, and it's going to be 45 minutes to an hour, you know, maybe it's like 5 to 10 people. You're not going to get to know someone by sending out a survey, right? Like you're going to get to know what they think they know of themselves, but you're not actually going to get to know the things about their lives or who they are. And so what I would suggest in terms of that first step in understanding, that first step in kind of understanding who that customer is would be almost to like talk to like 3 to 5 customers who are on your higher end, meaning they are like active purchasers and they're people who are heavily engaged. And then pick 3 to 5 people who are not heavily engaged and people who are maybe they haven't purchased from you in 6 months, right? And so part of that is really being open to having these conversations with some regularity. So, every quarter, every 6 months, so you can actually figure out what's going on in the lives of your customers. I've heard people say, I'm going to send out a survey so I know what's working or not working. I would say that surveys are great, but most of the time people will tell you what they think you want to hear rather than what they actually believe. And the only way you find out who people are is really through hearing their voice, right? It's like you get to hear the inflection points, the intonations. So that kind of process, that kind of customer interview process, I think is extremely important and is not to be overlooked. And I think that if everyone knows, everyone's gonna know this, everyone loves talking about themselves. So like, you get a customer on the phone, they're like, oh my God, here's what's going on. Here's how I found out about your business. Here's the last time I was there. Like, people are willing to talk about themselves. And I think that is important. And out of that language, out of those conversations with those customers is emergent the reason why people shop from you, right? Why do people love you? When you know that, right, that becomes the basis for your communication. It's like, that they love you because when they come into the store, they always feel, like there is, like the store is well merchandised and it's easy to find things that they love. Right. So in your language and communication, you might be talking more about, curation, right? Or kind of the feeling of like having these things chosen for you. Or maybe that's how you highlight, your personal shopping experience because the store and the vibe is so detail oriented. Or maybe your business prides itself on having everything and it's more of a, a grab bag. You walk in and there's so many items and it's hard to choose because it's overwhelming, and people love it maybe because of the competitiveness of the prices, right? And so from that perspective, it allows you to kind of then use language to help them feel like, oh yeah, I do want to make an appointment to come into that store and like spend an hour looking through things to find the things that I want. So I would say understanding your customer is very much beyond just looking at like customer analytics and data, and very much getting on the phone and starting to really understand who they are and why they love you and why your business is important to them.
Francesca, any thoughts on that? The Coral Gables market.
Absolutely. I think everything that Syama's saying is right on. Customers obviously love to talk about themselves. Retailers love to talk. So it's a perfect storm right there, because they do love that communication. And I think really the opportunities are there for that conversation leading to so much more. So when you've taken that step and you're finding out about someone and you're asking them these day-to-day questions, you might learn that their husband, brother, sister's birthday is the next week, or that they, maybe not right at this moment, are going over to someone's house and need a little housewarming gift, or they themselves are looking for something else in their life. And it's just another opportunity for us. What I think of is more of like a soft sell. It's like, you're not calling to be like, hey, sale today, buy now. You're calling to say like, kind of get to know them, and then you are establishing that relationship, and then they want to purchase from you, and that's just what it happens. We all have the power to choose if we're going to buy, the lovely body oil that we like to use from a boutique, or if we're going to buy it through Amazon, because chances are it's on there now too. So, I think it's just those touch points are so important, and making the customer feel special And I think you're right, Mark. We have shops in Coral Gables. They do an excellent job at this. You know, I know you had that jealousy moment when Violetta's put that lovely package outside for me with my name all over it, saying thank you.
So that inspired me to purchase. And then when I got my bag a few days later, they wrote, "Help us." Like I felt like they had been like locked in the deep freeze in the back of the building.
Oh, no.
That's okay. That's our role, not only as a chamber, but all of us are working together to help our businesses survive and thrive. So that's kind of the commentary and questions that I had. And so I thought we'd give folks an opportunity to ask some questions in the chat. Or if you feel like there's something that you're like, geez, Mark, I wish you'd asked about this.
No, I think that's a great time to take any questions from people. And or the other thing I thought maybe Syama could share her worksheet, because I know we didn't actually mention it.
We had a screen share, so
yes,
we'll go over it quickly. I mean, I'll show you guys kind of the
please use the chat if you have any questions. We do have one question in the Q&A section. It says, in media planning, it's important to consider customers' state of mind when they're digesting a given media. Even if a customer is on a certain platform, it doesn't mean you should speak to them at that time. I love that question, because sometimes practicing restraint is as much a part of the messaging as it is of sending a message. Now, we've done that before. We've done it with macro, significant issues in the community where people blacked out a page on their social media. And that sent as much of a message as it did writing, a personal reflection. But, if companies do that, I mean, all of them have, great messaging for their products and services. But some of them have moved into the social justice space. Some have moved into much more of CSR, corporate social responsibility space, because for them, that's what their customers maybe knew about. But now is the time to say, hey, by the way, we paid everybody for the next year, even though they're not coming to work. I think about Major League Sports teams who said, we're not open to play baseball or basketball, but we're going to pay our vendors, the people who are our frontline essential workers. They can't come to work and make you a hot dog or usher you to your seat, but they're our family. So I think that's more just an observation. But thank you, Amy, for that comment. And Syama, I'll turn it back to you to screen share.
Go.
So just to give it before you take it in, just to make sure everyone knows what we'll be doing is a follow-up seminar, our follow-up forum, like we've done with our other workshops, that this tool will then be really helpful for. Right?
Yes. Okay. So this is pretty exciting. So what I'm going to do here is do a screen share, and I'm going to kind of go over so you guys are prepared. It's going to have some dates at the top, and on the left-hand side, it's going to be a series of different activities. And so what we're going to do is, before the forum, we'll be sending out this marketing template. It is highly suggested to take some time to really go through the process that we've discussed so far. So step one, making sure you know, where are my customers? Step two, looking at your creative assets, making sure you have the right assets. And then this format here is going to be a really good planning mechanism, right, for you to use once you've identified what those platforms are. So the only reason I'm prefacing this is it is really important to be able to do that. And it's looking like it's saying I cannot screen share. So let me see if I can do that. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay. Let's try it again now. Screen share. Here we go. Okay, great. All right, guys, let me know when you see what I see. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's there. You got a nice little calendar and dates. So
there we go. Okay. So this is, kind of planning out for the whole year. As we're looking at this, so you notice here at the top is basically the week, right? So this is a macro calendar, right? This is meant to be used as you are planning out your major key communication strategies. I prefer to use something like this as a support system for mapping before you then take it and put it onto something like Loomly or CoSchedule, which are both digital platforms. But it's hard sometimes to move things around on a digital platform as you could copy and paste on Excel. So my preference is to like do the planning on a platform like Excel, and then you can take the planning and then go ahead and, you know, upload that to the actual channels, right, that you're using to execute. So Loomly is great. It allows you to kind of publish automatically. But obviously, as you'll notice, some of these things aren't just social media oriented, right? Communication isn't just social media. So here we have sales goals. This is important. Obviously, marketing is directly tied to sales. So you want to have an idea of what your sales forecasting looks like. When the week starts, key dates and events. So this is important, the key dates and events. So is it that you're having a special back to school promotion? Is it that, you know, there's something locally happening in the community that you want to make sure is mapped out on this calendar so you're not missing anything? Maybe you're having a, you know, friends and family shopping event or discount or whatever. So key dates and events, very important to map out. And then we start looking at sales support. So sales promotions, what are some of the major discounts that you're looking at, right? Or what are we going to be looking at in terms of, you know, the different formats of, is it a markdown at 20%? Are there key categories? So sales promotions, collateral and presentation. So I like to use this space here for links out. So what I would do is I like using Excel a lot. I would put a link into the folders of the assets in here for collateral. And then we start to move into public relations, right? So again, another communication touch point. Are there any events, sponsorships, press releases? What are the things that we are disseminating out with PR, and what's that messaging looking like? Then we have the interactive components. So keyword search, right? Most of us are probably up on, you know, Google keywords and trying to rank with SEO. So this tells us if we're going to start kind of any SEO programs. Google AdWords. Again, are we changing up the AdWords for the holiday season? What is the search engine advertising going to be looking like? Search engine marketing. Online discount sites. Are we planning on releasing anything that's going to be on, you know, Guild Group, Hotlook? Are there any places where we want to be sending out any information about these sorts of discounts or any partnerships, Zulily, et cetera? Directory listings and classifieds. So that's going to be a key indicator for us. This is more of a search engine optimization tool where you're kind of doing backlinks and whatnot. Brand ambassadors. So are we focusing on any sort of brand ambassador or influencer campaigns? Are there anyone we want to be planning to reach out for? What does that look like? Planning out our Facebook ads. Again, these would be more thematic. So it could be almost looking at, you know, what's going to be the major content theme for our first Facebook ad, our second one that's running simultaneously. Then we look at your Facebook organic. We have Instagram ads, Instagram organic. What is the email messaging looking like? How is the homepage being affected and changed by all of this messaging? So oftentimes what we forget is, yes, you can have all these ads running, you can have everything out there, but if you don't actually change your website messaging, it falls flat and you don't really bring it 360. So thinking of your website messaging as really this platform as like as almost like the home, right, is your website, and everything kind of comes back to the website. Then we look at things like print advertising, right? Any sort of, you know, so that's like the direct mailers that we've been talking about, sending out those note cards, et cetera. Print, I think, is great. Also, things like, you know, in terms of magazine publications, you know, personally, I found some really great results with the efficacy of, there's these new kinds of like direct mailers instead of like the value pack. It's like, you know, the one that, it's one like Casper and Lunya and Ritual Vitamins. And, you know, so there's these new ways of kind of sending out value packs, which I think are really awesome. any paid blogger, digital magazine type of stuff under advertising, and then research, right? So customer surveys, phone calls, all of that is also very important, and your marketing effectiveness, right? So how often are we kind of evaluating? It's a lot on this document, right? Obviously, not everyone's going to be doing everything on here. And in fact, guys, every one of these sections could further be bifurcated and expanded and detailed and planned out. So what you're actually seeing here is kind of the totality, if you will, of a marketing, you know, activation or program, right? You're kind of seeing the totality of it. And what you're going to need to do is kind of extract from it what is going to be most important to your business, and then take this as the high level planning document that it is, right? So each of these things needs to be broken out, right? So as we say, you know, kind of take a look at things on a more day-by-day basis. Obviously, you know, email is going to likely be once a week. Website messaging, maybe you're only updating that once a month, right? So not everything has to kind of happen at the same time or at the same frequency, right? But what I am asking you to do, and I think what this document illustrates so beautifully, is that there is a cohesiveness of everything, right? Like everything kind of fits nicely together. So when I hear people saying, oh, I want to launch advertising, one of my main questions always when it comes to communication is, well, what else are you doing in terms of the other components of advertising and marketing, right? It's not just the Facebook ads. It is truly all of these components coming together that create a strong communication platform.
So Syama, you know, somebody actually jumped into the chat and said, is there an example of one that's filled out?
So I do not have any client stuff that I can share, but I do have, for example, this was for May here, right? This was something we had kind of filled out for as like a dummy example. So you guys can notice here. So May 13th was Mother's Day. Right? We're going to be running a sales promotion for 25% off. Collateral, so graphics and copy for newsletter, for advertisements. We need to have that prepared. Special events. So we were going to do a pop-up shop May 30th, right? That was going to be a big push. Press releases. So writing the bloggers about Spring Essentials. So that was going to be one element of press releases were to bloggers. The following week was going to be writing to editors about new styles. Keyword search, so launching our SEO program. Google AdWords, this was kind of the initial thought umbrella that then further got expanded. So the Bahamas inspired jewelry, it ended up being kind of the theme, if you will, for Google AdWords. And as you guys know, Google AdWords, you can put like 50 different keywords under that, right? And so you kind of want to have AdWords almost broken out by buckets, right? Because you're going to be testing these buckets that have multiple words within them. Online discount sites. So this was also that third week of May was when the Zulily program was going to be launching. Brand ambassador. So there was some gifting that was happening to Ava Chen during this time period. And then this was the kind of strategy here in terms of both of the different Facebook ads. One was retargeting. The other one was new audiences and lookalike campaigns. And I think that might be all that ends up getting filled out here for this example. But yes, this is this is the vastness of the example that we had created.
That's awesome. So there was another question that actually was in the chat, not in the Q&A, and it's a little bit of a pivot, but it says, didn't hear about advertising messages that might be an interrupter to a user's experience. So we all know about the dreaded pop-up ads and things like that. And we talked a little bit about the texting being in your hand. Where are we at with those today? Has everybody pretty much moved away from the pop-up? I mean, that used to be a thing. And I'd be like, click, 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 click. And then the next thing I know, I was on the site and I was buying, 100 pounds of manure. I'm just telling you, I have no idea how that happened. But to put something in front of me, I'm going to buy it.
So when you're saying, so, the notion of, so when it comes to things like, the kinds of ads that get serviced now, there aren't a lot of pop-up ads in terms of like your user experience. And like, it's not, so that kind of the notion of like pop-up advertising is ultimately only, it's like, I think the only place where we actually see that happen, and it's not even really advertising, it's kind of like when you go on like Priceline, and then it's like it forces you to kind of click onto a couple other different places and you kind of open up new windows and things like that. We've moved significantly away from pop-up advertising, I'd say in the last 10 years. Really, right now, what we focus on so much as marketers is native, right? Things that look the most native actually tend to have the best conversion. So when we're thinking about native looking advertising, that's why, you know, for a while, the big trend was use real people in your ads, right? And like, you know, make it look as if it's a real post on Facebook, as opposed to something that is like so far removed, or something that looks very kitschy, or, you know, not native, if you will. So I would say, you know, the approach is going to be, how do I make my content feel the most native, right? Like it belongs there. And you'll notice that, for example, in magazine advertising, right? It's like now they have advertorials, right? Advertorials are there in order to make it feel more native. So I would say, as you're choosing platforms, my preference is always to choose things that feel more native. It's always better to buy advertising on someone else's newsletter than it is to buy a list and cold advertise yourself. Why? Because you're building up social proof, and you're leveraging someone else's platform. It feels more native. It's like, oh, we're in the same family, we support each other. If you just buy a giant list and you email to it, it might feel a little bit more spammy, right? It's like, oh, I don't know about that brand, or I've never heard of this before. So I would say look at it from the perspective of native content, and then also look at it from the perspective of, you know, what am I doing that's kind of making it feel more organic.
Okay. Francesca, any thoughts on that? Or are you just like me, where you're like annoyed by that?
No,
Syama, going back to the worksheet, which I think is very helpful, would it be not overly cumbersome, but that's something that in the follow-up discussion, you guys could work on more one-on-one?
Yeah, so
you couldn't share a client one, but maybe that's a great impetus for folks to do the follow-up session, which is a little more small group, where you're willing to do maybe just not all of it, but maybe pick the next. Think about the fact that, by the way, the lights go out in my office and I don't move enough. I miss my old office where it was just messy and there were light switches. But as a way to, you know, even look at the grant program that Francesca curated, that folks might use the third or fourth month with something like a plan like that, because they get a little extra boost with the $100 ads. So.
Absolutely. So our plan with this template is to disseminate it out so everyone has a chance to get their hands in it and start to play with it and feel it out. On the follow-up forum, our main objective is to go through it and really make sure that everyone feels comfortable and confident working through their processes. So I would highly suggest that everyone not only starts to work on the template, but also starts to build things out kind of more specifically, right? So like if it is your newsletter cadence, like build it out for the next few months or few weeks, you know? If it is Facebook advertising, let's take a look at the ad creative for that, you know? So I would say absolutely we'll spend more time working on this together. I think the more that people will show up to the table having completed it, it'll give us really an opportunity to kind of cherry pick people, which we have a lot of fun doing, and really make sure that everyone gets to apply it to themselves, right? So more fun and more exciting than showing someone else's example would be to actually support our wonderful retailers and branded friends here and do it with them. So I think that would be great.
And I just wanted to say one thing because of our audience and making sure they realize that, you know, this is a tool that can be used, even if you're not a restaurant or a retailer, if you're a professional service, if you're an architect, lawyer, doctor. I mean, everybody needs to plan their communications. So, so there's a little bit of space for everyone in there.
Absolutely.
Real estate agent.
There's like a weird noise.
It's like some feedback. Is it happening in your space or?
Yeah, I feel like it's my nest or something. Anyway, sorry. I'm like, what's going on here? Anyway, sorry guys, I got distracted by the noise that sounded like a bird.
Anyway, well,
sorry.
Hopefully it doesn't mean the fires are getting closer.
I don't know.
We had a little bit of a moment of panic on it.
Yeah, totally. I was like, what's going on?
So I want to let people know that there's still room for questions in the Q&A or in the chat. I know that we've been together now for the last hour and a half or so. Thank you, Monica, for your kind comments. We do believe that having programs like this, you know, with great experts like we have is really what we're supposed to be doing right now. I'm going to be working with Francesca, Julian, and their team to bring the partners back together and see what's next in terms of the work we do with Syama, but also the big picture, because this is an important time to be talking about recovery. We've been working very hard in relief and in reimagining what we're going to do next. And certainly Syama and our panelists have been a big part of that over the last 3 seminars. So we'll make a last call for questions, and then I'll give the final word to the ladies. So Francesca, we'll start with you because we started with Syama at the beginning.
No, sure. Just this, I thought this was great. Thank you, Syama, for your time. And of course, Mark, and for everyone that joined us. And we really hope you'll join us for the follow-up forum. If you haven't been to one before, we do have a lot of fun. They're very interactive, and it's a real open moment to ask your questions and to dive deep. So, you know, do the pre-work, but also bring all the questions to the table, because it's really a good opportunity to just kind of sit there and say, okay, you have your Facebook ad plan, but like dive into what that looks like and the planning of it. So, and we had fun with that. So looking forward to the next one. And we haven't planned the date yet, but we will announce it soon.
Yeah, I think it's going to be wonderful. You know, the whole, if I could just like impart, you know, with people the importance of really spending time and understanding what works for you, you know, as an individual, as a business owner, with your time constraints, right? With your budget constraints. This isn't about how do I do everything and be everywhere and stress myself out and max it out. It's really about thoughtful, considerate communication consistently, right? And I think that if we, as individuals, as business owners, can do these things consistently in a way that feels good and that is incorporated into the way we do business, that is actually what builds brand, right? And builds customer relationships over time, because it is the consistency. Everyone knows when you say something and then you go do something else, you know, like the world is no longer in a vacuum where, you know, you can get away with saying something and not be, you know, called out culture, right? As we're all so familiar with hearing. So I would say, guys, please, you know, have fun with this template. Take a look at it. I'm so very excited to spend some more time with you, to be able to explore it further, build some things out together. And when we do get a chance to do that, I would say as you're filling it out, remember, it's not about filling everything out. It's about filling out the things that are going to be in alignment with your customer, and with your with the authenticity of kind of where you see the business growing, right? Where do you have the assets to do this? And so plan to spend some time with it. You know, hopefully you guys have the opportunity to look at assets and things like that.
Syama, when should they expect to receive it?
So guys, we're going to be emailing it out.
Okay, so they should just be on the lookout for an email from Scaling Retail.
That's
that
right.
Has the
It's
attachment.
going to be an email. It's also going to have a recording of this in case anyone has any questions. So there'll be a recording of this as well as the template.
So ladies, a couple of thoughts. My takeaway words for the day, which I hope everybody who was on the webinar took to heart. We talked about things like cadence. We talked about being customer-centric. A word you used, you talked about paralysis, and I always use the phrase paralysis by overanalysis, is that you need to make decisions and you need to do something. Sometimes you don't need to do anything and you allow things to kind of happen organically. Digital fatigue. I love this one, you know, customers and their lifetime value. And I think the big one is we're going to keep doing these for each and every one of you. We value what you bring to the table. We think you're amazing. So thank you, Adele, because we are who we are in Coral Gables because of our retailers, our restaurants, our small businesses. They are the very backbone of our local economy. As you recover, we'll recover. You're the job creators. And most of all, you're the creative force that allows Francesca and I, and certainly our relationship with Syama and others, to bear the fruit of your labors. So with that, it is about 3:40 here on the East Coast. We stand adjourned.
Bye, guys.